Good morning, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by ServPro. Jam-packed and a fun, busy show on tap. That means Jake Fromm before we're done, Connor Riley live from Athens, where Georgia's in the midst of its preparations for the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Speaking of that rivalry game, reason to believe that the coach on the other side, Hugh Freeze, taking a slightly different tact in preparing for this rivalry game this year than he's done in the past. We'll give you the evidence on that, and you can decide for yourself. And off the top, Georgia got some weird criticism apparently within the last few days. And I think in a roundabout way, this may be exactly what Georgia needs for, you want to call it an energy reboot or just an external enemy every now and then is just not the worst thing. So I'm going to tell you about this off the top, and we'll talk about how Georgia might can use this to its advantage, and we'll have some fun doing so. So we're glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by ServPro, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by ServPro, cleaning, restoration, construction.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
All right, coming up in a couple of minutes' time, Auburn coach Hugh Freeze, the other coach in this rivalry game on Saturday, has probably stepped in it a little bit when he's talked about the Georgia-Auburn rivalry, said some things that were awkward, that caused him some trouble. We have some evidence this year that Hugh Freeze seems intent on not making that mistake again. We'll lay it out for you. You can decide for yourself. That's coming up in a few minutes. Let me, though, begin this way. I think a lot of Georgia fans were a little bit surprised by the point spread for Georgia going to Auburn. We thought it was actually a more robust spread than some folks gave it credit for, but Georgia was only, depending on where you looked, a 3.5 or a 4-point favorite at Auburn. You don't necessarily have to bet the game to care about that. It's more about the expectation for performance, and a lot of odds makers think this will be a reasonably close game for Georgia on Saturday. And what's even more interesting than that, one of the things that I like going back and doing is the first point spreads we see posted usually come around May. Sometimes it's as late as July. But that early to midsummer is when a lot of the sports books and places, Vegas or online, they'll start putting out what they call their games of the year. And if you compare what the Georgia-Auburn point spread is now, 3.5 to 4 points, to what it was back in the summer when it was commonly found at 7 points, what you see is a replication of what's been a pretty consistent theme this year. You know, avid sports bettors, the odds makers that serve those bettors, that group collectively has downgraded the opinion of Georgia in their mind. We saw it before the game against Tennessee. We didn't really see it against Alabama, but that was also notable given the fact that Alabama had looked badly against Florida State, yet the Georgia-Alabama line was right there where it always was, with Georgia about a 4-point favorite or so. And now you've got Georgia less of a favorite against Auburn than it was viewed to be back during the summer, even though we've just seen Auburn lose its last 2 football games. And while they were both reasonably close at Oklahoma, then at Texas A&M, truth is they gave up a bunch of sacks against Oklahoma, didn't move the football at all against Texas A&M. Auburn has not really looked good, especially in the offensive side of the ball the last couple of weeks. And yet even with that, it seems that the odds makers and the bettors have a less favorable opinion of Georgia than they once did, even in light of whatever Auburn might be. And so when you take all of that and you consider all of that, here is, I think, the opinion you're probably forced to have. Fair or not, it's no less true that there is more skepticism about Georgia among the public at large right now than we've seen at any time prior to Kirby Smart winning his first national championship in 2021. Over the course of the last half decade or so, it's not common to see a lot of, are we sure about Georgia, or people outright picking Georgia to lose, or just expressing skepticism of Georgia. But we're seeing more of that now than we've seen in the past. I think for the purposes of what we care about, that shows up materially in 2 different ways. Thing number one is a lot of that skepticism exists within Georgia fan base itself, we call Dog Nation. And if you look around, you will see Georgia fans are kind of on pins and needles. They're restless. They're concerned. They're worried about this. They're worried about that. And depending on where you go to talk to Georgia fans, whether it's your favorite, lunch counter during the day or a social media thing at night or wherever you're at, Georgia fans are, in some cases, I don't quite say ready to pounce, but boy, you get the sense there's a restlessness among Georgia fans where they're ready to say, why isn't this better and why isn't that better? We are very, very close to some infighting and squabbling based on just how Georgia fans feel about not quite being so sure about their team right now. Perhaps you've noticed that. Here's the other thing that also shows up as well. It is a little safer for the average analyst, the average talking head, the guy who's out there giving opinions about college football. It's a little safer to say something negative about Georgia and then get away with it, not be immediately proven wrong. Little easier to do that now than it's ever been before. And we are seeing some folks who want to reserve the right to do just that. Apparently, even the guy that was part of the broadcast on Saturday, Jesse Palmer is. Palmer, the former Gator, reality TV star. Now he's an analyst working for ABC, ESPN. And Jesse Palmer was apparently critical. And I didn't see this. I didn't go back and rewatch the broadcast, but apparently was critical of the Georgia defense during the game broadcast on Saturday. Kirby Smart was asked about that during his weekly press conference on Monday. And as you might imagine, Smart was nonplussed to hear the analyst who was calling the game, who you'd presume that Kirby would have had a meeting with. That's typically the way that kind of stuff goes down. Kirby did not seem too happy about Jesse Palmer's criticism of the Georgia defense and in kind of a sarcastic tone fired back at Palmer's criticism of Georgia. You're going to hear the question from the reporter and the answer from Kirby Smart on, I think, reflective of the skepticism that exists of Georgia. Apparently, the game analyst, Jesse Palmer, pretty critical of the Georgia defense. Take a listen to this.
Kirby, Jesse Palmer on the air Saturday said Georgia's defense needs more creativity on third downs. Seems to have guys lined up on most third downs in the same spots. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't know. You'd have to ask Jesse. I'm happy for Jesse. I'm glad he makes a living getting to make those decisions. I focus on what gives us a chance to be successful, play well, execute well, who's in the game, what strategy do they have on offense? Are they going fast? Are they going slow? I don't concern myself with it much.
So when you hear something like that, when Kirby Smart says, hey, I'm happy for Jesse, obviously, hopefully your sarcasm detector is attuned well enough to recognize the nature of the sarcasm that is. Pretty clearly, he's pretty aggravated by that. I think you can tell from the tone of voice there. And I think my point here for a moment is, given everything I said a moment ago, that there is some skepticism of Georgia right now. And on our show ourselves, even though we're very pro-Georgia, we've also been forced to acknowledge the truth is, really don't know exactly how good Georgia is and don't know exactly what Georgia is going to be able to prove here this season. And admittedly, we do have some concerns about the Georgia defense. And that mood, I think, is prevalent all around DawgNation right now, where a lot of people look around, they say, I want the best for Georgia. I hope for the best for Georgia, but I'm just not really sure. And that concern, that skepticism creates angst among the Georgia fans within DawgNation. And it seems like in any given moment, we're very close to some squabbling, some infighting kind of popping up out of nowhere. So I would humbly suggest here for a moment that what you got from Jesse Palmer right there could perhaps be something that Georgia could use to its advantage. And that for Georgia, who has a lot of internal strife going on right now, perhaps there's a chance to end that internal strife by pointing towards an external enemy. And there is no better candidate for that than Jesse Palmer. He's a Gator after all. He's a reality TV guy. Just saying that out loud kind of gets on my nerves. We were just showing some video of Palmer a moment ago. Would it be okay if we showed some of that again? Now, listen, he's much more handsome than I am. I certainly don't dispute that. But if you've ever seen a movie, if you've ever watched any movie of any kind, if you're watching video right now, that guy is not the hero in any movie you've ever seen. That's the villain in every movie you've ever seen. Now, Palmer may not be a bad guy. I honestly don't know. You're probably not surprised to hear The Bachelor is not exactly my cup of tea. I don't have a personal reason to dislike Palmer, but in terms of his background, the fact that he's a Gator, lousy, stinking Gator, the fact that he's kind of a reality TV type guy, which is just, to me, gross on spec. The way that he looks, kind of the 80s movie villain. I'm just telling you right now, it is very easy to turn Jesse Palmer, I think, into an external villain for Georgia, whether he actually is one or not. And frankly, I think it might be to Georgia's benefit to do that. Let me see if I can explain it this way. First of all, for the Georgia defense that takes a lot of pride in performance, the idea that Jesse Palmer, by the way, you don't see this a lot, the analyst in a game being that critical, apparently, as it's been relayed, of the team that he's calling during that particular game. You don't see that a lot. For a Georgia defense that takes pride in performance, that alone ought to be a rallying cry. Kirby Smart, defensive-minded head coach. Are you going to let Jesse Palmer be this right about you? Georgia players, this guy says that you're just standing around doing nothing. Are you going to let this guy be right about you? Are you going to let that happen? Are you going to let him be right? This lousy, stinking Gator calling your game? Are you going to let him get away with that? So that alone, I think, could be a rallying cry for the Georgia defense. And by the way, no matter what analysts are saying, or even in some cases fans, and no matter what we're all saying about the Georgia defense and the pass rush in particular, a lot of that coming on third down for sure, especially after the Alabama game. Kirby Smart said after the Kentucky game on Saturday that no matter what anybody else says, he actually still really likes his defense. So if he does, all the more reason to use Palmer as the villain. This is Kirby Smart from Saturday.
Look, I'm excited. Put what you want. I get to watch our guys every day in practice. I watched our team have 60, 70-something third downs in 4 games before today, and I have a lot of confidence in our defensive unit, team, pass rush, coverage, third down plan. I feel good about it. I don't feel good about the stats, but again, you can't look at stats are misleading, guys. There's just not many opportunities we get. If the ball comes out before you get there, then it wasn't probably even good to rush. We should have dropped 11. So it's one of those things that you can't equate to that. Do we need to do better? We need some guys that can win one-on-one inside. Ask them why they went fast on third down, because they didn't want us to put people in there. If we were bad or I thought we had issues, they'd be begging those guys to come on the field. Hey, man, y'all send in those guys on third down. They kept us out of it by going really fast. That's a mechanism we use sometimes because you don't want to face those guys.
So a couple of points, just for the sake of honesty. I probably don't think the stats are as overrated as Kirby Smart does, just being honest, but nonetheless, that's the point that he's making. And as he relates to Kentucky's going fast to keep their third down guys off the field. If you look at, assuming the snap counts that I saw were accurate, I'm assuming they were, a guy like Chris Cole really didn't play very much on Saturday. And you're assuming that some of that was related to what Kirby Smart was talking about there. And obviously you can't have that. You got to have your best players in the game, and you can't let the pace with which your opponent's playing dictate completely who you have in the game. You got to figure out a way to get around that. But nonetheless, the overall point there is that Smart says, I don't care what anybody's saying, fan, analyst, whoever else, still really like my defense. And I would say, great. Then this is awesome. If you believe in your guys, if they believe in themselves, then let's turn Jesse Palmer into the enemy, external foe he needs to be here, and find a way to rally around that. Now, what I'm about to tell you is completely ridiculous. But honestly, I just feel like we need a little bit of an energy reboot. This is a fun season. Georgia's got a chance to do a lot of things. I think the whole mood right now is just really pretty heavy. I really do. And if we can lighten the mood a little bit, I don't think it's a bad thing. And I want to go back into the recent past of college football here for a moment. Is there a chance that we can turn this Jesse Palmer into our version of what Lou Holtz became a couple of years ago? Remember Holtz, legendary coach at Notre Dame, was also coach at South Carolina. He was an analyst. And for whatever reason, Lou Holtz decided he just didn't like Ohio State and didn't like Ryan Day, apparently in particular, and just thought that Ohio State was a soft football team and didn't mind telling folks about it. In fact, let me give you a little taste here. This is Lou Holtz. This is back from the 2023 season. Pretty critical of Ohio State, going obviously into the game against Notre Dame, the team that he loved, the program that he loves, and pretty critical of Ohio State in the process on all of this. Now, Holtz is not as handsome as Jesse Palmer. He's probably not as eloquent with his speech, but nonetheless, this became a big deal a couple of years ago. Lou Holtz on Ohio State.
Notre Dame is a better football team than Ohio State.
Love hearing that. Preach, Coach.
He has lost to Alabama, Georgia,
right,
Clemson, Michigan twice, and everybody that beats them does so because they're more physical than Ohio State. And I think Notre Dame will take that same approach. You take this message to Ohio State. You tell them they better bring their lunch because it's going to be a full damn day's work.
Hell yeah. I love that. Hey, hope you heard that.
So he's essentially cutting a promo there with Pat McAfee on his show. That's going back to way back in the 2023 season. And it's mostly ridiculous because Lou Holtz is kind of a cartoonish figure, especially in the post-career world where he has a funny manner of speech. And, he just, this coach that most young, folks don't even remember back when he was coaching. But I'm telling you right now, in that Ohio State-Notre Dame game, that became a big deal. And Ryan Day, the Ohio State coach, took it personally. So much so, and yes, I know we made fun of this at the time, and I don't take any of that back. But honestly, in the case of Ohio State, maybe it worked. The fact that as silly as it sounds, the criticism that Holtz had for Ohio State, Ryan Day took it personally. And then after the game, when Ohio State had essentially only won because Notre Dame had like 9 guys in the field, after the game, in the moment of celebration, Ryan Day cut his own promo and called out Lou Holtz right there on the field. Let's go back in time and remember that.
I'd like to know where Lou Holtz is right now. What he said about our team, I cannot believe. This is a tough team right here. We're proud to be from Ohio, and it's always been Ohio against the world, and it'll continue to be Ohio against the world. But I'll tell you what, I love those kids, and we got a tough team.
So that's ridiculous, and he gets really high-pitched at the end, which is not, the most, whatever. But how great would it be if the Georgia defense steps up and just shuts down Auburn on Saturday? And in his post-game remarks, and listen, oftentimes we get the best version of Kirby in this on-field post-game interview. How great would it be in that moment if Kirby Smart's like, I want to know where Jesse Palmer is right now. Where's Jesse Palmer? Now, of course, Georgia doesn't do that sort of thing, and Kirby Smart especially doesn't do that sort of thing. Wouldn't it be a little bit fun? I mean, wouldn't that be a good energy reboot here for a fan base that's kind of at each other's throats a little bit and everybody's on edge because we're not quite so sure about Georgia and we got people criticizing Georgia in a way we're not used to hearing. TV analysts all of a sudden feel permission and freedom to come out there and say Georgia's not creative enough on third down. I would say we could use an external enemy. So you know what? Let's make, much the same way Ryan Day once did, let's make Where's Jesse a battle cry. Georgia defense gets a sack. Georgia defense shuts down Auburn. Where's Jesse? He went to Florida. He's a reality TV guy. I already have a little bit of a distaste for that sort of thing anyway. This is a very easy guy to make a villain. Let's make him our villain. And you know what? Hopefully this Georgia defense is ready to go out there on Saturday and say, where is Jesse? As the Georgia defense proves him wrong on the plains in the Deep South Soldis rivalry. I hope so, man. That'd be great. I hope that's the case. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by ServPro. We're glad you're with us, no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, 10 a.m., on demand, video anytime after that, Radio Athens, Sports Radio 960, the Ref podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. We are just happy to have you as a part of our program here today, and so thankful to our friends at ServPro who make it all possible for you there as well. I tell you, I love what ServPro does for people all around. We had a little bit of an issue the other day where my wife, she likes to cook using the big cast iron, and all of a sudden the day just flamed, just boom, popped up out of nowhere. Now, thankfully, it didn't turn out to be more than that. We, got rid of it, but I'm thinking, gosh, this is about to be a call to ServPro here. Thankfully, it was not, although I'm also thankful that if I needed to call ServPro, they're ready to answer, they're ready to respond. Fire damage, water intrusion, those sorts of things that cause big problem for you, create a big mess to clean up. The restoration specialists of ServPro want to get you put back together like it never even happened, get it all cleaned up, restore your property to its previous condition. That's what they're all about. Each franchise also independently owned and operated. That means when you do business with ServPro, you're doing business with folks who are just as vested in a positive outcome for you as you are for yourself. It's one of the reasons why I have a hearty recommendation for them. Honestly, I got good friends here at ServPro. I think they're great people. They do our game ball on Saturday. At some point in time, we got to start talking about the game ball because right now we're doing this via fan vote. That's not, I would say, going great in terms of how the fan voting is going. But you know what? ServPro's participation in it is awesome. And that's why I love having him part of Game Day. I love having him part of DawgNation Daily. But more importantly, for folks in our audience who want to take good care of their property and restore and repair their property when need to, I'm glad ServPro exists for them there as well. So it's servpro.com, SCRV, servpro.com for more on that. That is servpro.com today. All right, busy show for us rolls on. It's Jake Fromm later on, Connor Riley here in a moment. Prior to that, let's go around the doghouse here today, poured by our friends at Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. And man, oh man, am I loving seeing all that Mercier Orchards Hard Cider as a part of a lot of these tailgates all across Athens and wherever the dogs are playing here right now. That is a great thing to be able to see. Okay, we're going to do a bit of an investigation here for a moment. I'm going to lay out some facts and evidence. I'm going to let you determine for yourself. It certainly seems like Auburn coach Hugh Freeze might be taking a very different approach to this year's Georgia-Auburn rivalry game than he has in the past. Freeze is probably a sharp football mind, wouldn't have survived as a coach as long as he has if he was, and especially in light of some of the things that have gone on with Freeze. The fact that he keeps reemerging means he knows a lot about football. But he does, I would say, have an awkward manner of speaking, and oftentimes just says things that create some trouble for him. I would call these unforced errors. You may remember going back to prior to the Georgia-Auburn game in 2023, that was Freeze's first game as Auburn coach against Georgia. In this historic rivalry known as the Deep South's oldest, Freeze sort of stepped into it with his pre-game press conference, weekly press conference that week, not even fully acknowledging the extent to which that Georgia-Auburn even is a rivalry, and I would say at the time, revealing himself to be a real outsider to that Auburn program, and the whole thing just felt awkward. This is a reminder from like 2 years ago.
I mean, I don't want to quote something that's inaccurate, but it's the oldest rivalry in the South for sure. I don't know about nationally, but am I saying that correctly? I don't sense that it has, I better not, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I'm new here, but I don't sense the hatred that is in some other rivalries that I've been a part of, but nonetheless, I think it's intense. Okay, I'll find out. I'm not big on hate. I'm really not. I'm big on just, man, this means something to so many people, so we should compete in a way out of love for our people, not necessarily for hate for other people. That's kind of the way I operate. But man, I hope we compete because we love Auburn, and it means something to the Auburn people to compete against Georgia. So that'll be my approach, and but nonetheless, that love is a great motivator for me.
Awkward stuff makes me very nervous. And I'm sorry, that is a very awkward moment for Freeze. You know it's awkward anytime you're a coach doing a press conference and your words create off-mic chatter. When he says, yeah, I don't even really think this is a rivalry, and you hear this murmuring, well, I guess I'll be finding out then. That's just a very awkward thing, and it's an example of Freeze doing what he does a lot, which is, I think, stepping in it, having an unforced error. And for him, messing up as it relates to the Georgia-Auburn rivalry is a fairly consistent thing. That example from 2023, he was also on with our friends The Next Round, a very good show based out of Alabama to talk about Alabama and Auburn, a little bit like the way we talk about Georgia. Freeze was on with them back during the summer and very much got out in front of his skis, very much was way too presumptuous in assuming that Georgia and Auburn were about to stop playing each other every year, and in doing so made it sound like he didn't want to play Georgia every year anymore, the same way he once didn't acknowledge the Georgia-Auburn rivalry. He also, as recently as this summer, seemed pretty intent on that rivalry, or content if that rivalry were just to sort of go away. This is Freeze as recently as this summer.
I'm pretty confident that the SEC is pretty solid on where we are, and I think they'll enjoy the new rivalries when they get to see Texas and Oklahoma, and among the great rivalries that we already have in our conference. And there'll be some I'll miss playing Georgia every year because I just got to experience it for my first time, and I loved every minute of it other than the outcome.
I'll miss playing Georgia every year. The folks in the next round quoted him as saying, well, as it turns out, he's still going to be playing Georgia and the Auburn rivalry, at least for the next 4 years, assuming that Hugh Freeze is still there. But it's an example of, boy, it seems like Hugh Freeze has a way of just saying the exact wrong thing when it comes to the Georgia-Auburn rivalry, downplaying it, running from it, just messing it up when it comes to this particular series. This week, I think we have some evidence that Freeze seems to want to take a different approach. And looking at the nature of Saturday's game, a little more intent on talking about the game the way maybe he always should have been. A lot more intensity, a lot more focus. It sounds like Hugh Freeze is now fired up and ready for this game in a way that he hasn't always sounded like. This is Hugh Freeze from yesterday.
We just talked about season 2, and that's where we are. I kind of break the season down into those bye weeks as season 1, season 2, and then season 3. And, everything is still in front of us, and it starts with an incredible rivalry game that you ought to just relish the opportunity to play in and get to do it at home, which is, I think we've won 4 straight at home now, and hopefully that gives us an advantage. I know our people will be, a factor in this game, and that will be nice as we haven't experienced that the last couple of weeks. So it's definitely a mixture. Yes, there's always a sense of urgency because it's the next SEC game, but there's no question you can't run from the fact that this rivalry game it means something to a lot of people.
You can't run from that, and believe me, I've tried, is what Hugh Freeze could have said. But while I'm mostly joking about the comparison between the way he talked about the rivalry now and the way he's maybe talked about it in the past, I do think that there is a very real reason for why Freeze is so excited about this game, looking to feed off the home crowd. And I think, in all honesty, I actually thought the Freeze press conference from yesterday was really interesting because in the early stages of that press conference, Freeze was about as honest as you're going to hear a coach be about how desperately they need a good performance after what he thought was a very bad offensive game plan, maybe in its operation and maybe its execution too, against Texas A&M. That I think right now Freeze recognizes himself as a desperate coach. This is a desperate team. And I think they are really hoping they can feed off of a big home crowd for a better performance, which does make, call it like a wounded animal or whatever else. I do think getting in a roundabout way makes Auburn more dangerous on Saturday. This is more from Hugh Freeze talking about just how badly they want to play better after a dud 2 weeks ago against Texas A&M.
When you don't perform in a manner that gives your kids a chance to win a game like last couple weeks ago against a really good football team, it's sickening and it's disappointing, and just assure you that we've worked tirelessly in the open week to correct and give our kids the best chance to win. The accountability rests upon me and our staff, and obviously there's things that kids got to be accountable for too, but by and large it was it's disappointing that we didn't give our kids a better chance to win that football game. But the great thing is it's behind us, and there's so much setting in front of us. Starts with this week playing at home against Georgia, and really told our team yesterday how excited I am, and I know our staff is, and they'll be the same.
So listen, I'm mostly kidding about some of this, but in all honesty, I think that's a pretty honest and fairly compelling statement from Hugh Freeze. The final margin against Texas A&M was relatively close, but as he said, they played terribly offensively there. And Freeze is really owning that. I think that Auburn's got this Georgia game circled. I really do. And the fact they've already lost twice, I think that's going to be totally irrelevant to the atmosphere on Saturday. And if I had to guess, the way that Auburn also plays. As we said to start our show, experts are expecting this one to be a close game. I have no reason to disagree with them on that. And I think Auburn's going to be ready. I think Hugh Freeze knows how badly he needs this game. And I think the Georgia's going to be ready too. But I really believe that Georgia gets Auburn's best shot on Saturday. Wouldn't expect anything other than that. We'll make that around the doghouse. It's poured today by our friends at Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. It's a great time to be up in North Georgia. Go visit Mercier Orchards, the gorgeous 200 acres worth of orchards up there in the North Georgia mountains where all the apples and the fruits are grown that become Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. And I think this time of year, if you can get up there and go experience that, I believe you should. But the great taste of Mercier Orchards Hard Cider can also come to you here too. You can ask for it at your local grocer, at your beverage store, your favorite restaurant on tap, and oftentimes you're going to see it. But if you don't, we're hearing from our audience, they're having great success just saying, hey, BA at DawgNation Daily has been talking about Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. I want to try it. Would you mind stocking it so that I can? And that word of mouth, you'd be surprised, goes a long way. We want to support a Georgia-grown company like this. Everybody that I've turned on to Mercier Orchards Hard Cider, they love the taste. Honestly, a hard cider may be a new beverage category for some of you, but when you see the way the fruits blend together, when you enjoy that taste, I think it's going to be something you, especially this time of year, you're going to make a big part of everything you've got going on. So we think it's a great time to try Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. I think the best thing for you to do is just search it online. Mercier, that's spelled Mercier, Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. You can also find the website. It's mercier-orchards.com/hard-cider. That's why I say just search it. Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. You can find out the great story of this Georgia-grown company that's putting the delicious taste of hard cider in restaurants, beverage stores, supermarkets. It can be available wherever you are. All you got to do is ask for it. So check out Mercier Orchards Hard Cider today. Okay, it's Jake Fromm before we're done. But for now, Georgia's continuing its preparations for Auburn. Let's talk to Connor Riley about that here today. DawgNation Daily, presented by ServPro.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Let's get ready to talk to Connor Riley. Obviously, Georgia getting ready for Auburn on Saturday. And Connor, I was just playing some clips from Hugh Freeze, and I'll kind of joke about the way in which you talked about the rivalry now and maybe doing a better job of that than he has in the past. But honestly, I think there's something pretty compelling about how honest Freeze was in the clip we just played about how desperately his team needs this game. They've played close on the road the last couple of weeks at Oklahoma, at Texas A&M, but offensively they really have not played well. I think he knows he needs a better game against Georgia. This is the classic SEC thing where even if Auburn's lost games, I expect there to be a lot of optimism in the stadium on Saturday, and I do think that Georgia's got to be ready for it. I'm expecting Auburn to take a big swing at Georgia on Saturday. What about you?
Yeah, I think back to the 2019 game where Georgia visited Auburn. Auburn coming off a bye in that game, had some up and down moments during the season, and they gave Georgia everything that they could handle. It was a game where I think Georgia was very fortunate to find a way to win. They got into Auburn territory 3 times that day. They scored touchdowns on all those drives and won 21-14. I think that game meant a lot to Kirby Smart. That is the infamous HBTFD game. I'm not going to curse here on your wonderful program here, but you can put together what was said there that day after the game. And I do think there are some similarities there between that 2019 game and this upcoming game. For one, Auburn, I think they went 9-4 that season. I think that's where Auburn, is about talent-wise with the schedule that they have coming out of this. I think those games against Oklahoma and A&M on the road, a lot of teams would have lost both of those. And for Georgia, again, this is probably the most gettable they've been since that 2019 season. And so I think going into Saturday, when you factor in the rest advantage, you factor in that Auburn was given a night game for a long time now. They've known that this game was going to be played at night. Add in that they are retiring Cam Newton's jersey on Saturday. This has all the makings of a game that just forces outside want Georgia to lose. And I'm going to be very interested in seeing if Auburn is actually capable of doing just that, because at the end of the day, I think since Hugh Freeze took over at Auburn, he is the worst coach in the SEC in one-score games. Conversely, since Kirby Smart got started at Georgia, he is the best coach in one-score games. And I do think Saturday will once again be a one-score game when these two teams meet in Jordan-Hare Stadium.
I will admit I did not hear the Jesse Palmer criticism of the Georgia defense during the broadcast. I have not gone back to rewatch that. But I will say, as somebody who watches a lot of games on TV, you don't hear that very much. The game analyst that critical of the team that he's calling. Now, people on the internet on TV are giving hot takes all the time. but there's usually a little bit of a firewall between the analyst for the game and the team that he's calling. Those two entities are usually allied together, at least in most cases that I'm familiar with. What did you make of the fact that Palmer was, at least the way it's been described to me, pretty critical of Georgia on TV?
I found it interesting. I found Kirby's response curt and not all that surprising that way. And I also have a hard time disagreeing with Palmer's analysis from Saturday. Now, granted, some of that I do believe was opponent driven. I think Georgia, especially when they got up early, they knew they weren't going to have to do a whole lot. I do think that it was a very vanilla scheme with what Georgia saw. But and knowing how Glenn Schumann's wanted to coordinate defenses before, I think that Georgia has often wanted to lean on its talent advantage and just say to the opposing team, hey, just beat us. We're not going to be super creative. We're not going to be super aggressive in terms of what we try to do and the packages we try to employ. We're just going to ask you to go ahead, drive the field on us. We're going to try and stop the run. We're going to try and limit explosive plays. And I think Georgia is running into a little bit of a wall in the sense of this is a program that is no longer as talented as it once was. No team in the country is as talented as the teams 3, 4, 5 years ago used to be because of the transfer portal and the way that that has impacted depth. And so I think Georgia is in a weird crossroads state where they're having to, on the fly, change the way that they do things. And look, like the pass rush is what the pass rush is. I wrote this week, it is the stoppable force, the Auburn offensive line, which has given up the most sacks in college football, not just on a per game basis, but total still, even though they have already had their bye, versus a Georgia pass rush, which other than Nnamdi Ogboko does not have a sack from its defensive line. Their outside linebackers do not have a sack. I believe 6 of the 7 sacks have come from those inside linebackers, which isn't too different from how Georgia, I think, prefers to play. But I'm going to be very interested in seeing what wrinkles, what changes does Georgia have going into this week, because that was the chief criticism, I believe, that Palmer levied against the Georgia defensive coaching staff, was that it was just very uncreative in the way they try to do things. That's good enough to beat Kentucky, but with this Auburn team, with everything that is going into this game, I don't know that they're just going to be able to do the same thing once again, line up and play the football and just be better than Auburn.
I think Georgia should use this to its advantage. I think Palmer's an easy villain here. We made the comparison earlier to Ohio State making a villain out of Lou Holtz. I think that Jesse Palmer just needs to be Georgia's villain. Frankly, Connor, it's gotten a little tense around here for my taste. This is the football season. We don't get much of this. I want to be happy. I want to be in a good mood. But there's some real angst because Georgia fans, I think legitimately so, are just not quite so sure how good Georgia really is. And clearly they want their team to win all the games. That we almost need a little bit of an energy reboot. So if the lousy stinking Gator, Jesse Palmer, the gross reality TV star, I'm not into that whole thing. Like, if you can't make a villain out of Jesse Palmer, then you can't make a villain out of anybody. And like my message to Kirby Smart is, are you going to let this guy be right about your defense? Go out there and prove him wrong.
Are you sure your own producer, Kaylee Manziel, even wants to make a villain out of Jesse Palmer?
I know she's
a big fan of Mr. Palmer.
I know. She's told me that before.
I do agree with you. I like the image of Georgia turning Jesse Palmer into Lou Holtz. I wonder if we can get someone on McAfee to do a Jesse Palmer impersonation, whatever that ultimately wind up looking like. Maybe, Georgia finds a way to bring in the canceled Chris Harrison to, work against Jesse Palmer's juju there. But to that point, I think we're going to learn a lot about Georgia over these next 2 games. You mentioned how we don't really know how good this Georgia team is. I do think they're a good team. I think a great team finds a way to win these next 2 games on the road at Auburn, at home against Ole Miss. And if they are, I'm doing the math here, 6-1 going into that second bye week, I think you're thrilled with where this team is and with what they have left. And so, those are 2, obviously, I think, losable games. Georgia probably going to be a slight favorite once again when they take on Ole Miss next week. But if this is a team that can be great, because I don't believe they're great right now, but I think they do still have the potential and ceiling to be great. If they win these next 2 games, that's going to go, I think, a very long way towards proving that they are great. And they don't necessarily need to blow teams out like they were in 2021 or 2022. I think with the way that the schedule is and the way that these teams are presented now, if Georgia just finds ways to win like they did against Tennessee, like they were, very close to doing against Alabama, I do think that is going to uplift the mood a little bit here. And I think as we see, as this sport has changed so much, get more in line with expectations and have an understanding of, this is just sort of like an NFL game now where you just got to get your win and be happy and take it and move on to the next week.
Yeah.
If Georgia's able to do that these next few weeks and, maybe use Palmer's words to help get them there, I think a lot of Georgia fans are going to turn their tune.
I want to hear people asking, where's Jesse after this game on Saturday? I want to hear Kirby Smart say that on TV. I want fans holding up the where's Jesse signs. We need an enemy right now, an external foe. I think that Jesse Palmer is a pretty good candidate for that. Connor, I got more I want to ask you about. Let me also remind folks about our friends at Circle K here for a moment. Now, obviously, they're not an enemy. They're a great ally. As you're driving to get to wherever you got to go, you heading towards the plains on Saturday, wherever else, there are Circle K locations close to you to get you everything you need. Got to get fueled up with your vehicle. You need to fuel up with yourself. Our friends at Circle K got you ready for all of that. You get the snacks that you need. You're out running errands. Listen, you can quench your thirst right now with one of those Circle K Polar Pops. That's a large fountain drink, and they're starting right now for under $1. Can you believe that great price for a large soda? Amazing stuff. Plus, they got daily deals on coffee, energy drinks, so much more. And they got 400 locations across Georgia, plenty more around the Southeast. So wherever you're going this time of year, there's a Circle K location near you. It's fast, it's convenient, it's always there when DawgNation needs it most. And plus, you can also download that Circle K app to find a location near you as well. We love Circle K being a part of what we have going on here around DawgNation. Connor, I said to John Stinchcomb yesterday that every ankle injury that I've ever seen is worse than initially thought. That's just the way it always goes. Apparently, this is the one example of that not being true, that apparently Kirby Smart gave a much more positive update on Monroe Freeling than I expected to perhaps hear. Was that enough for you to believe that maybe Freeling does play on Saturday? Seems like he's been doing a pretty good job, and Bo Hughley can remain a part of some valuable offensive line depth because you really don't have that proven tackle as in a backup role if Hughley gets put into the starting role. What do you make of what we heard about Monroe Freeling yesterday?
I think they're going to try and give it a go with Monroe, not to use some rhyming there, but ultimately I do think that you're still going to see a healthy amount of Bo Hughley in this game. Kirby's always been very close to the vest with injuries, and the fact that it's not tightrope surgery, I do think is a big win for Georgia about how healthy he's going to be, especially going against an Auburn pass rush where that's probably the strength of their defense right now. I think that that's something where, again, if he's able to go and he's able to play as close to 100% as you can, you obviously take that. But knowing these ankle injuries and, quite frankly, with the way Kirby talks about things, where the more positive he is sometimes, the more skeptical I get. Whereas I think last year, you think back to that Texas game in the SEC championship game where going into it, I don't think anyone was really expecting to see Trevor Etienne. I do think that we are going to, see Monroe Freeling in some capacity try and get it out. I think he's probably going to be questionable on the availability report that comes out Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, and then Saturday before kickoff. But I think that this is a game still where I'd be pretty surprised if Monroe Freeling is able to play 100% of the snaps at left tackle, which is something he would be doing if he was fully healthy.
Connor, look forward to your coverage from Athens here today. Obviously, Georgia getting ready for the Auburn Tigers on Saturday. Can't wait to be, as they call it, we won't say loveliest village because I don't quite think it is, but it's certainly the Plains. We'll see you there on Saturday, and we appreciate everything you got going on there at DawgNation.com.
Yep, as always, it's a pleasure.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Connor Riley, great guest. Another great guest coming up in a moment. We'll talk to Jake Fromm here. But first, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC. Courtesy of Royal Caribbean, let's get you ready for what I hope is a great Royal Caribbean cruise vacation sometime here in 2025, heading towards 2026. Let me tell you, you may just be ready to swing for the fences and go for the big boy right now. That's Star of the Seas, the debut recently undertaken of the brand new Icon class of ship. I've not been on Star of the Seas yet. I hope to be very soon. What an experience this is going to be, because I love the way in which the Icon class of ships here is just redefining the cruise vacation with so many fun and interesting things. Take advantage of space on the ship. The various neighborhoods that Royal Caribbean's famous for, they're all enhanced and in many cases, just increased in size and just magnified and terms of the experience, amplified in their experience. That's everything that Star of the Seas is all about. And you deserve a chance to experience this for yourself. And one thing I love about a big ship like Star is there really is something for everybody. For the parents, for the teenagers, for the children, there's no better family vacation right now than what you're going to get with the Royal Caribbean. And if you've got a great experience that you'd like to have for your family, we think Star of the Seas is a great option. All the pools and slides and the things you can experience. They have their own water park on the ship, for instance. You can experience all of that. Jessica Slater can tell you how. She's a travel advisor standing by to book your Royal Caribbean Cruise vacation. Give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can email her as well, jslater@dreamvacations.com. We think you owe it to yourself to be on Star of the Seas at some point in time in the near future. Great chance to book your travel, for instance, next spring break, next summer. Great time to be thinking about that right now. And Jessica Slater can tell you all about it. All right, let's talk here before we get Jake Fromm, cruise around the SEC just for a moment. Obviously, Florida got a big win against Texas on Saturday, and you may be thinking, well, all is good and happy in Gatorland because of that win. Not necessarily. Honesty does compel us to admit there's been a little bit of a minor dust-up with the Gators and their fan base on the heels of this. There's a guy named Jacob LaFrance, who is the Florida general manager, I guess. And after the game, in celebrating the win on X, LaFrance made fun of those who call Billy Napier Sunbelt Billy. That's the nickname he's had because he came from Louisiana. And while that's oftentimes a moniker that non-Florida fans use, if you look at the way that Florida fans respond to this online, there was some thought that this was Florida mocking its own fans for their previous criticism of some of the lack of success that Napier's had. This was the opinion of Florida fans themselves expressed online, which does lead you to believe that even after a big win, all is maybe not happy with Napier and his own fan base. We've said before that while Billy Napier is a well-liked guy, you know, family's been connected to Georgia high school football for a long time, for instance, and everybody who knows the Napier family likes them well. At times, maybe Billy Napier hasn't been perfect in how he's talked about Florida fans. You'll remember the thing we talked to you about a year or so ago, the rural fan living in his mom's basement, whatever it was. He said just a lot of negativity at times. And obviously, if you're the coach, you get frustrated when fans are critical of you, and maybe you have the temptation to turn that criticism back on them. There has certainly been some of that, and even after the win against Texas, at least according to this deleted tweet, some of that apparently still persists where Florida fans thought they were maligned by that particular statement. So we'll see where this goes from here. Not going to take more than just a win against Texas to rehabilitate that relationship between Florida and its fans. We got a couple of SEC scheduling updates yesterday. Both of these minorly controversial in their own way. South Carolina was supposed to play a home-and-home coming up against Miami. That has now been canceled. Almost anybody who pays attention to this will say that much like we've seen Georgia-UCLA canceled, the Georgia-Oklahoma game in 2023 got canceled because Oklahoma's coming to the SEC, that what you're seeing here between Miami and South Carolina, there is more of this to come. In fact, there is a lot more of this to come. For instance, if you want to keep this just to Georgia, they've got series coming up against what? NC State, Louisville, Florida State, more against Clemson. In the future, you think about Ohio State. My prediction is that none of those non-conference series will be played. And all the other SEC teams that have their own version of that, we've just seen a steady stream of these cancellations. And I believe we'll see more of them that now that conferences are expanding and now that the playoff structure is what it is, these non-conference series that had been scheduled, I do not believe are going to be played. I'll also mention this here real quick, is that Auburn also announced yesterday that its home game next year against Baylor. This past year, Auburn played in Waco. That game is being moved to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, a little bit like what Georgia and Georgia Tech are going to do this year and what Georgia and Florida are going to do next year while Jacksonville Stadium is being renovated. Auburn's getting was it $10 million for this? Some of that's being spun as NIL directly to the players. So much money that Auburn simply could not, I guess we're led to believe, turn down the chance to sell its home game. A lot of Auburn fans are very upset about this. College football fans in general seem to be a little bothered by this. Atmosphere for games just appears to be better on campus in stadiums for a lot of people. And moving this simply because of money doesn't seem to be all that popular. But popular or not, it feels like we may have a lot more of this in the future, because if you get the chance to make $9-10 million, whatever it is, there aren't very many programs going to turn that down. So Auburn finds itself in the awkward situation of it played Baylor at Baylor, but it's not getting the return home date. It is instead sold that to the city of Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Auburn players going to cash in on this. The Auburn program going to cash in on this. And whether we want it or not, these high-dollar neutral site games, there may be a lot more of this in the future. And we already see Georgia cashing in on that when it comes to the cocktail party, and maybe even more of that perhaps in the years to come. We'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. I was going to do another story on Texas and Penn State. We'll save that for later on, though. Instead, here's a part of a Kroger Fresh Take. Let's get ready to welcome in Jake Fromm to the program here right now. Always happy to have Jake, and it's especially fun to talk to Jake after a Georgia win on Saturday against Kentucky. Jake, we appreciate your time. Thanks for being a part of the show.
Yeah, always glad to be here, Brandon. Thank you for having me. Always good to talk about the Dogs following a really good win in response to a loss.
One of the things we said on Monday's show, looking back to Saturday, was in the post-game press conference, I thought that Kirby, in a way that he doesn't always have to be and sometimes chooses not to be, was really candid about Gunnar Stockton coming off Stockton's first interception. And I think intuitively we understand this to be true, but it was interesting to hear Kirby just lay it out that it's okay to throw a pick. Now, you can't throw a million, but if you live in fear of throwing an interception, you're probably also not making the kinds of throws that give your team a chance to have enough explosive plays. And I thought that Kirby was pretty candid about that. I think he went into some detail about that. And I think when you listen to him on that, non-quarterbacks, most of us are, you're obviously different, but as non-quarterbacks, I think you got some pretty good insight into exactly how Kirby views the quarterback position. And I think what they want to see from Gunnar moving forward of, hey, make the big throws. If you make a mistake, we'll try to play defense and we'll come back on the next drive. I don't know how much of that you even got a chance to hear, but what do you think about Kirby Smart just laying it out about, it's okay to throw a pick every now and then?
Yeah, I think that was really cool of Coach to go into that and speak and basically kind of open the books of kind of how he views aggressiveness in the quarterback position. I think that Coach is really spot on. There's a certain level of a rip it mentality of being aggressive that you have to go out and say, hey, I have to go make these throws. I'm not playing the position to not miss or to not do something or to play the position conservatively, because that will get you in a jam and in a mess when you need the quarterback to go win you a football game. So I think Coach is spot on here of just say, hey, it's okay. Hey, look, we're gonna be aggressive, and it's much better to learn in a game like this versus down the road later on in the year in a big time game when you need it. So I'm all in for Gunnar to want to be aggressive and learn from his mistakes. And it's a pretty low risk scenario in a game like Kentucky. And I thought it was really cool insight we got from Coach.
So week 1 against Marshall, Gunnar Stockton's the leading rusher for the entire team. Week 2, Austin Peay doesn't really run very much at all. Didn't run very much against Alabama, had 2 rushing touchdowns in the first quarter against Kentucky. I do think that Georgia's better when Gunnar runs. I also want Gunnar to be careful and not get himself hurt, so you got 2 sides of the same coin there. But overall, I think one of the things I would like is for there to be some stabilization at some point where you go into a game knowing about how much Gunnar is going to run. And it seems like we've had wildly different results in terms of how much he has run versus games which he hasn't run very much at all. What do you make about the fact that week to week it's at times been so different?
Yeah, it depends on the game, depends on the game plan, just depends on the matchup that you get between the offensive line, the defensive line. Half of his runs could be from just pocket scrambles and on third down. And a lot of times, it's design runs that you get in the red zone. That's a lot where his touchdowns come from. So it just depends. It's a week to week deal. We said on the post game show with A&F, hey, if I get to see Gunnar 6 or 7 carries, somewhere between 40 and 60 yards and a touchdown, to me that is the perfect stat line for Gunnar running the football. It's enough to keep defensive honest, where they have to honor him, honor his legs and what he's doing. They know he's a threat in the run game, and it just opens a lot more in the passing game and for the other backs running the football as well. So that's what I want to see from Gunnar moving forward, that particular stat line, and I think that's where the sweet spot is.
Because one of the things that I've said, Jake, is I think what Georgia does best right now is what I think of as creative running plays. You got a couple of rushing touchdowns for Dylan Bell on Saturday, which you can get from Gunnar Stockton. Obviously, Chauncey Bowens is emerging right now. I mean, he's maybe a star in the making. There was the really creative run that Georgia used in overtime against Tennessee. That I think that Georgia is good on the ground right now. The run blocking seems to be holding up very well. And so building the passing attack off of what I think is a successful and pretty creative rushing attack, to me, that's Georgia at its best for the moment. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I certainly agree. The run game has looked very well, especially in these last couple games. Chauncey Bowens is doing a great job as emerging as being the guy. I think he offers a very unique skill set. I think he has probably the best vision in that running back room, and he's running the ball certainly hard. And man, Bobo scheming stuff up, calling some really good stuff. I mean, it's a very complimentary run game right now because you're getting it from the backs, you're getting it from the quarterback position, and you're getting some wrinkles with Dylan Bell and with Zachariah Branch. So all in all, man, things are looking good. And when you are able to attack teams and defenses from a lot of different angles, it is very, very tough to defend.
Got something else I want to ask about here in a moment. Let me remind folks before we do. It's our Kroger Fresh Take with Jake Fromm here today on DawgNation Daily. And, of course, we love everything that Kroger is all about. And this time of year, my daughter, she's already talking about, got to get our pumpkins, we got to get Halloween candy. Kids get that clock that starts ticking. They're ready for Halloween. And when you want to get stocked up, our local Kroger, your local Kroger, is a great way to get everything that you need. Fun time for families this time of year. Kroger's got you covered on all of that. And if you want more time to enjoy these types of things, football, fall events, Halloween, you want more money in your pocket to do so, a Kroger Boost membership, great way to take advantage of that too. Let's face it, you're like me, you're schlepping around all the time. I'm going to Auburn on Saturday, high school football on Friday, going to my kids' stuff throughout the week. That's a lot of miles in the car. I need to save money at the pump when I can. As a Kroger Boost member, I'm getting twice the fuel points in the things I'm already buying at my local Kroger. And you want to get all that great stuff for fall, great stuff for the upcoming holidays, including Halloween. You can get free delivery. You can get free pickup. I see these trucks in my neighborhood all the time. Refrigerated, that means the produce and whatever else stays nice and cold and crisp, just like it's supposed to. So to find out more about this, go to Kroger.com/boost. That's Kroger.com/boost for more on this today. All right, Jake, let me finish with what has been kind of a hot topic among Georgia fans. And you know how it goes. Like every now and then, there'll just be this little fixation that pops up. And right now, everybody's talking about where Noah Thomas is. Now, there's also some of this as it relates to tight ends, although Oscar Delp had a very big catch for Georgia on Saturday. So I'll just keep it to Thomas here for a moment. That he's in the game. He drew a couple of pretty important penalties when he was held or interfered with against Tennessee. Kirby Smart said there had been opportunities, just hadn't quite worked out. But you got a guy that was very productive for Texas A&M, who is playing some here for Georgia. But in terms of generating the kinds of catches he seems capable of providing this Georgia offense, it has not happened yet for Noah Thomas. As a guy who's been a part of the Georgia offense, what do you make when a fairly high-profile transfer comes over? We're not quite to the halfway point of the regular season, but we're getting close. That'll come up after Saturday. And yet Thomas really hasn't been a part of the Georgia offense as of yet. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very tough situation. Obviously, Noah Thomas wants that football, but there is, quite frankly, only one football to go around. We mentioned the running back room, and there's 3 or 4 different guys in that room that need to get their touches. Gunner is running the football as well. There's multiple other guys in the passing game that need to get their touches. Zachariah Branch, Colby Young has really emerged and progressed maybe a little bit more than people expected, and that's kind of hurting the Noah Thomas opportunities and chances to get balls. Coach alluded to there have been a few opportunities that just didn't quite get connected and didn't get happen and get executed for whatever reason. And that's just kind of the way and the flow of the season. Not that something can't come up late down the road, but it's just kind of you get into the ebbs and flows of the seasons, and you get out of the mix. But there'll be an injury, something will happen, there'll be an opportunity, there'll be a matchup, and all of a sudden Noah Thomas will look like the guy we always wanted and expect him to be. And we don't know when that opportunity will come, but I think it will happen at some point in the season.
Let me squeeze in a quick follow-up on that, because what Kirby would also say too is, hey, we're not out there running plays for just one guy. We're going to take what the defense gives us. And as a non-coach player, the thought I always have as it relates to something like that is, okay, well, I do get that. You want to take what the defense gives you, but at a certain point, there's also something to be said for if you only take what the defense gives you, you'll only have what the defense wants you to have, and you don't want your opponent to dictate the pace of how the game is necessarily played. So how do you, I guess, draw that contrast with, okay, if we just take what the defense gives us, then maybe some of the playmakers we want to get involved, we actually don't get them involved as much as we want to, because clearly that's what the defense is trying to take away from us.
There's a lot of word jargon there, but what I will say is, when it comes to game planning and scheming stuff up, hey, you have your 2 or 3 guys that have to touch the ball in some shape or capacity, and you're going to scheme something up to get them the football. Sometimes defenses call the right plays and they have the right coverages, and they do try to take away certain things that you're doing, which is why you put guys in other spots to succeed and be that plan B, backup plan, the second read, the third read. So that happens. You're going to want to take your shots. So you're going to do your best to get your playmakers the ball. At times, defenses do take those things away, and that gives opportunities for other guys to step up, like Noah Thomas. So the opportunities are there, like the tight end room as well. So those are where those opportunities arise, and we'll see later on the season what defenses want to take away. From Kentucky, I saw them want to take away 33 Chauncey Bowens in the running game. They had a real big emphasis on stopping him. They had a hard time doing that, but that kind of opened the can of worms for everybody else to get their touches in as well.
As I say goodbye to you, this just coming out just a moment ago, good news from one of your former teammates, the Georgia-Florida Hall of Fame inductees have been announced here for 2025, and Sony Michel, one of your teammates, joining Freddie Gilbert going into the Georgia-Florida Hall of Fame. So that's good news for Sony.
Awesome, Sony. Man, congrats. Nobody deserves it more than him.
Jake, appreciate your time. Great conversation. Thank you so much for your insight. We'll look forward to doing it with you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. See you next week.
Good stuff there from Jake Fromm, great former Georgia quarterback, and happy for Sony Michel, along with Freddie Gilbert, going into the Georgia-Florida Hall of Fame for that game, neutral site for Georgia, coming up later on this season. And by the way, speaking of neutral site games for Georgia, there are 2 of those here this year. Don't forget about that. Another one to conclude the regular season, Mercedes-Benz Stadium against Georgia Tech. And, of course, this creates a real opportunity for Georgia. You know how it is. Sometimes tickets to the big games can be hard to come by. If you want to see Georgia in a big game, and by the way, this in-state rivalry game looms as a very big one here this year, one of your best, most accessible ticket opportunities may be against Georgia Tech. So we want you to act fast because, honestly, selfishly, I want as many Georgia fans in the stadium as I can get. So this is the time to do it. Go to mercedes-benzstadium.com/events. You can get your tickets for this year's Georgia Tech game. It's supposed to be the Tech home game. Tech has chosen to move the game to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We think that creates a real opportunity for Georgia, but Georgia fans got to ready to take advantage of it. So one more time, get your tickets right now while you can. mercedes-benzstadium.com/events for more on that. That's mercedes-benzstadium.com/events for more on that today. Obviously, one of the weirdest sports stories of the weekend is an unpleasant one. Mark Sanchez, former New York Jets, USC quarterback, now analyst, was involved in an altercation, and he's been facing criminal charges because of that. That's very serious. Our point of bringing this up is it also weirdly overlapped with a former Georgia great, we would say unfairly so, here this week. David Pollack was very funny on X. The story from Tribune Review Sports, I guess a local news site somewhere, was retelling the events involving Mark Sanchez, the Fox analyst, and in talking about Sanchez, showed a picture of David Pollack. David Pollack retweeting it with the magnifying glass emoji of, "Are you sure that's Mark Sanchez?" No, it's not. By the way, it's not even the best picture of Pollack. Pollack's a handsome guy. There are far better pictures of him than that. It's really not Mark Sanchez. And It certainly sounds like Pollock and Sanchez couldn't be making any more different, personal decisions. So we'll say some prayers for Sanchez, but we'll also make sure we're very clear in pointing out that David Pollock is not mixed up in that story at all. And we'll give David a golden shoe for a very funny response on all of that. About the lousy, stinking Gators. About 1,795 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. They may have ex-quarterbacks taking pot shots at Georgia on TV, but the Gators themselves have not beaten the Dogs in a very long time, and we don't think that's going to change anytime soon. That is our Gator Hater Updater. You'll have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by ServPro. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on that. I'm going to start at DawgNation.com today. Get some comments there, and we'll just find out how everybody's doing today. Hope you enjoyed Jake and Connor and everything else from today. I'm getting ready for Georgia-Auburn on Saturday. I'm excited about it. I do think it's going to be an intense atmosphere. I think Auburn's going to play well, probably better than they've played other games this season. This is one of those things that I always liked about the SEC. It almost reminds me of, if you remember 2016, when Georgia was not very good. Georgia had lost several games. Georgia was a double-digit home underdog to an Auburn team that came into that game ranked in the top 10 in the country. And if you remember the game, that night, the idea that Georgia had not been very good could not have been less relevant. For that particular night, Georgia was the better team, feeding off the home crowd, and Georgia fans were cheering as if their team was undefeated, and this was for a spot in the SEC championship, the college football playoff. That's just what you get sometimes in college football. You get more of that in the SEC than other places. And if I'm honest, I think that while I hope that Georgia withstands it, I do think that Georgia is going to be on the receiving end of that kind of atmosphere on Saturday. I do. Matt Rugavina says he was playing the I Like Driving in My Truck. You'll know that reference to Auburn from the past. He says, I was playing that last night. My 7-year-old told me that saying someone sucks is not nice. Yeah. My 11-year-old immediately chimed in and said, but it is Auburn week. So there you go. Conversations like that happening with young families all across our state and all across Dog Nation too. So it's very funny, man. Very funny. Let's see what else. K-Dog says, see, I'm getting my voice back. Yeah, it's not perfect. Not perfect. And I have reason to believe that I still got to take good care of it. I've got to try to find some brass when I possibly can. I can tell it's a little bit different, but it is getting a little bit better. It is getting a little bit better. Garrison Tucker says, who has more rushing touchdowns Saturday? Is it Gunner or Jackson? I certainly hope. The one thing about Jackson Arnold is he can really run, and one of the things that Hugh Freeze has done against Georgia is he's really utilized quarterback running game, really the last 2 years' games. So you got to be careful with that. You got to imagine they're going to have a game plan for it. Obviously, they've seen other teams that have had success running quarterback against Georgia too. But boy, as I told Jake, I do hope that running approach from Gunner stabilizes. And it's one of those things that we just see as a part of what Georgia does some each week. I hope that's the case. K-Dog also says he believes that Georgia can win out. Well, they're certainly going to be favored to win every game. But as you know, math is a funny thing. Even though Georgia has a greater than 50% chance of winning every game it's about to play, their chances of winning all of them are going to be pretty low, lower than 20%, for instance. So it is going to be, and look, unknowns always create a weird anxiety among fans. It's one thing to be 2021 and 2022 when you essentially knew your team couldn't lose. There was even some angst back then about how Georgia might win and what the win might mean for other games. There was always some of that. But now, look, and I just think we ought to embrace this. I do. And find a way to make it fun and just go along for the ride as much as we possibly can. I really do think that's the only thing you can do, is just to hope for the best. Georgia goes into Saturday, and I hope they win. I do. I hope Georgia wins. I think they will, but I'm on guard for them not to. I view this as a very losable game for Georgia that they'll still probably win. That's my viewpoint on Saturday. This is a imminently losable game. Imminently losable. But I believe that Georgia will probably still win. And that we, as I've said before, are no different than any other college football fans now. We go to a stadium or tune in to watch on TV hoping that our team will win. And I just think that's the right approach for Saturday. Georgia could lose. I hope it wins, and can't wait to go along for the ride. Let's see what else. Senior Rock 54 says, anybody ever driven through Auburn going somewhere? You kind of drive through there if you're going down towards, you eventually cut across. If you're trying to get into Mississippi, going in towards New Orleans, you cut across 10. You got to go 85 to do that. You do have to do that. Like you're going towards Montgomery. It's not very far away. I mean, if you're Georgia, at least from the Atlanta area where I live, and depending on where you are, it's going to be maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if you've never been to the Georgia-Auburn game, it's pretty easy to get there. In fact, from here, I could be in Auburn almost as quickly as I could be in Athens. Almost. Really good. From where I'm sitting right now in Midtown Atlanta, I could be in Auburn almost as quickly as I can be in Athens. Yeah, D talking about the Sanchez situation. I mean, that's a wild story, man. That's a wild story. I was telling Cody and Kaylee before the show, too. It's like, can you imagine the feeling if you're Mark Sanchez? And I don't make a lot of this. This is a very dangerous, potentially situation, but it seems like Sanchez may have also been the instigator. When you wake up from a hospital bed and you slowly come to the realization of how off the rails your night went the night before, like, what's it like to have that memory, to the extent that you do remember it, come flooding back? My gosh. How bad would that be? Frederick Meredith says Georgia's likely has one more loss coming in the regular season. Probably I just don't quite know who it's going to be to. Yeah, you could be right. I guess the point that I'm getting to is I think there's an entire array of possibilities for Georgia. I really do. An entire array of possibilities. I think the next 2 weeks, for instance, are really tough. So this idea of, I've got Georgia losing one more, or I've got Georgia winning all the rest of their games, or, I've got Georgia losing 3 more times. Look, I think that there are a number of outcomes that are possible. And I don't know that there is one that's all that more possible than the other. I really don't. In terms of 0 more losses, 1 more loss, 2 more losses, I think that they're all reasonably possible. We have mostly done this show with me generally saying I believe that Georgia's very good, and I believe that'll be proven over time. That's been my general theme for most of the last few years. That if there was reason to doubt Georgia in a given moment, it was always relatively easy for me to say, give it time. I think you'll be relatively happy with what you see as the games progress. And with Georgia, that opinion was well-founded. If you'll notice, I don't say that much right now. I don't know. I don't know that Georgia is going to win on Saturday. I don't know that it's going to beat Ole Miss. I don't. I don't know that it's not going to use a double negative, but I don't know that it is. Now, if others of you are making different analysis, you come to a different opinion, I'm not going to tell you can't do that. But I believe the most correct way to look at Georgia is to not assume you've got some big winning streak coming up just because that's what you've gotten used to seeing Georgia do, and to also not assume that there's some sort of disaster looming too because of what appears to be a persistent problem here, persistent problem there. No, I don't quite see it that way. I really don't. I think there is a range of possibilities very much in play for Georgia. Paul Moon, by the way, good to see Paul checking in. He says, I'm an optimist. I'm always going to assume we'll do well until we don't. If Gunner progresses, our pass rush shows up. If Ellis, Harris, Mello develop, we could be in very good shape. Yeah, I mean, look, and I do think what Paul's pointing out is worth mentioning here, which is in the midst of some things that still need drastic improvement for Georgia, there are other areas in which Georgia clearly is or has gotten better. For instance, they're way better running it now than they were previous year. Way better, way better. They're way better, at least so far, and they've played, 3 SEC games now. They're way better at stopping the run than they were in previous years. So that's an example of year-over-year improvement that they've shown. Also, in the midst of this season, I think they're improving in some respects. I think they're identifying some players. The cornerbacks might be getting better. And DeMello Jones and Ellis Robinson are a pretty good example of that. Inside linebackers are very strong. The offensive line, very maligned. Seems like they may be getting a little bit better with, obviously, the need to continue improvement, but it seems like they may be getting a little bit better. So this is why the remainder of the season for Georgia, I believe, is so mysterious. Because on the one hand, there is improvement that desperately needs to take place. We're not quite so sure how likely that is to happen. On the other hand, there is pretty obviously some incremental improvement that is taking place in a way that maybe you didn't see a year ago. Carson May says, why so negative? I don't know that I'm being negative, but here's the number one rule I try to follow. I really do. And I don't get one single extra viewer for doing this. I just try to be honest. I don't know that I'm neither optimistic nor pessimistic in that, as I've said, I don't know. To me, negative would be, Georgia's going to lose, they're going to do this. But I just think a fair reading of the facts in front of us suggests that losses are possible. That doesn't mean losses are going to occur, but they're possible. Now, why would you tell us that? The number one rule I try to follow, there are 2 rules actually, but they're tied together. I want to be honest and I want to be fair. Fair to everybody involved, including those who want a honest assessment of what the real situation is. And I just couldn't look myself in the eye if I didn't come on here and try to be as honest as I possibly can be. That way, when I tell you, boy, I think Georgia's going to be great. When I do tell you that, I want it to have some credibility. And right now, what I'm telling you is, I think there's a chance that Georgia can still be great. Totally think that's a possibility. Totally think there's a possibility. I think, though, that there are enough blemishes when you probably should be less certain of that than you maybe have been in previous years. I do. Certainly, this championship era. Jonathan Aaron says, what chance do you give of Cam Newton wearing something weird on Saturday? Yeah, almost 100. You might not be surprised to know that Cam Newton's fashion choices and my fashion choices couldn't be more different. So, yeah, my guess, I don't know if he'll have like a foxtail pinned to his jacket or something like that, but he'll certainly have something weird. Jay Shipe says, I got my voice back and now I'm going on long, drawn-out thoughts. You can't win. You just can't win, especially with Jay Shipes. Let's see what else. Frederick says Georgia, Texas A&M, Bama, with Georgia losing a tiebreaker to Bama, not getting the SEC championship game. Yeah, I mean, once again, and Frederick, you may be just as certain as you can be, and you may turn out to be right. I'm just saying I can't come close to matching your certainty, because while I don't really know what the future holds for Georgia this season, I would say that when it comes to most of the rest of the SEC too. I really do. Because the 3 teams that you mentioned, the team that's really played the best in the SEC thus far has been Ole Miss. Now, that may not be likely to last. That's fine, but let's keep that in mind. Let's also not be quick to assume that just because Texas has lost twice, they're necessarily out of it either. We're going to watch Texas on Saturday attempt to do a bounce back against Oklahoma. The winner of that game has to still be taken seriously too. Y'all, this is what makes it fun right now, is that the league's deeper than it's ever been. There are very few teams that you would, frankly, Kentucky may be the only one you would look at and say that's an easy out. And even Kentucky played Ole Miss relatively close, as a for instance. that this is just a much deeper SEC than it's ever been before. So if there are people willing to be certain about who they think the two best teams in this league are right now, that's all fine and good. But I don't pretend to be certain unless I am, and right now I'm clearly not. Wildman Slayer says the defense is going to get better and they are not as bad as everyone thinks. Yeah, listen, Georgia's got two things it can build off of with its defense. They are stopping the run better right now, and that is important. Their inside linebacker play is outstanding, and that's tremendous too. They can't not have a pass rush. And the same way I was talking to Jake a moment ago, on offense, you can't just say, well, we take what the defense gives us, and so therefore so-and-so never touches it. You can't say that because otherwise you're letting your opponent dictate terms to you. At the same time, on defense, the idea of, and I don't know what you do about this necessarily, I'm just saying it can't be this simple of, well, if they get rid of the football fast, and if they go fast on third down, keeping us from subbing, therefore we can't get our pass rushers in the game and couldn't get to the quarterback even if we tried. It can't be that simple to unplug your defense. It just can't. So at some point, Georgia's got to find an answer for that. But if they can find some pass rush, some ability to be disruptive, then yeah, massive defensive improvement is still possible. I do think, and I've said this before, I think that Georgia's better right now on offense than it is on defense. And I think the ceiling is higher for the offense than it is on the defense. But I'm hopeful, just like Wildman Slayer says, that the defensive improvement continues. Gary Holt says, I think that Missouri beats Alabama. That's another one of those games where the point spread's fascinating because when most people initially saw it, that seemed like a pretty small spread. Alabama was only about a 4.5 point favorite on the road. Well, guess what? It's moving since then. It's moving heavy in the direction of Missouri right now. Depending on where you look, that thing may be down to like 3 points here right now. So there is clearly a lot of action on Missouri. And y'all know I was very high on Missouri before the season began. I liked them over their win total. I don't think you need a win against Alabama to exceed the 7.5. I don't. I do think Missouri's probably a dangerous team. Alabama handled them easily a year ago. This is a pretty fun game. It's a really good weekend coming up and a pretty good game. Let's see what else. Barry Watkins says, I know Kirby won't do it, but I would like to have a specific package for Ryan Puglisi just to let the rest know we have another option if needed. I get that. It is important to note that Puglisi came in and made a couple nice throws and then threw, an interception against Kentucky. And I'm not anti-Puglisi. I think that Puglisi could have a very bright future. He may be a future Georgia starting quarterback. A very good chance that he will be. I just think it's important to note that at no point in time this year did anybody who I trust, who's closer to it, who's more around it, who's just deeper in it, people that have better access than I do, at no point in time did any of those people ever think that Ryan Puglisi was seriously challenging to be Georgia's starting quarterback. And I don't take pleasure in saying that because I don't want to disparage Puglisi, and I'm not trying to troll those of you who really like Puglisi. This was not a close competition at all. Puglisi came in, threw it pretty well a few times on Saturday. Then he threw a pick. I don't think that's a condemnation for him or anything like that, but it's certainly not evidence that Georgia made the wrong choice at quarterback. It's just not. So I think the goal for Puglisi over the course of this season, and I think this is happening, is he's getting more comfortable with playing, and Georgia's getting more comfortable with the idea of playing, because Kirby said it this week that Gunner's a little banged up, taking some hits. If he were to be banged up enough that he'd have to leave a game, would they feel okay putting Puglisi in a game? At the beginning of the season, I don't know that they would. They would have had to have, but I don't know how they'd have felt about it. I do think they are getting more comfortable with the idea of Puglisi playing if Stockton couldn't. But it is just, I think it's appropriate to be honest here, is that this was an emphatic decision to start Gunner over Puglisi before the season began. Not based on because I was there and saw it all play out, but people who were a lot closer to that than me have led us to believe that was the case. On YouTube, Jalen Jackson says, what am I missing here? I've heard some national media talk about us like we are garbage. I've heard people say that we are worse than last year. There's no way these people have watched UGA play. I mean, as I said before, and I think this makes me different than some of y'all, I think the appropriate answer is I don't really know what you're going to get. I mean, I don't know that I take a ton from the game against Kentucky. I do think it's good that Georgia won it comfortably. I do. I think that's good, but I don't know how much that really proves. And, the Tennessee-Alabama game are similar in that they were both very competitive games where, in the case of Georgia, maybe Georgia made just slightly more plays than Tennessee did. But that was a pretty close to even game. The Alabama game was a game in which, once again, slightly even game. Alabama just made a few more plays to win. But, I mean, I think this makes me different than some of you, and it's not a very hot take. It's not cut up, make a clip out of this, but I think the appropriate take for Georgia is I really don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what anybody's going to do right now. I think I said this on Monday's show. The goal for me is how long can you hang around? That as the weeks progress, teams are going to vote themselves off the island. And if you can prevent yourself from being one of those teams, then maybe that'll create a situation for you to be reconsidered at some point. I don't know that I've seen what I think is excessive criticism of Georgia, but there is a natural skepticism. And I said this off the top of today's show. The point spread's an example of that. Georgia's point spread against Alabama didn't budge from the summer, even though Alabama was expected to come into that game undefeated. Alabama had lost badly against Florida State, but the opinion of Georgia had been downgraded to the point where the point spread didn't change, even though Bama had lost. Georgia was a 7-point favorite against Auburn back in the summer, based on the books that put that out. Only about a 4-point favorite now, 3.5, 4, whatever it is. That's a downgrade in expectation for Georgia, even though Auburn's lost twice. And talking heads are going to say what they say, but the odds makers are, they stand to lose money if they're wrong. So clearly they're not going to be flippant with the lines they put out there. There is currently a skepticism of Georgia. And listen, a lot of that exists with Georgia fans themselves. Now, that skepticism may prove to be wrong. It might. But this, for me, is not 2022 when I was going around saying, boy, I can't wait for Georgia to shut up these critics, and I can't wait for Georgia to stuff this in their face. That's the best experience I've ever had as a sports fan. My team was doubted, and yet I had confidence that the doubters were wrong. I doubted the doubters. I had confidence that the naysayers of Georgia were wrong. This year, I'm as hopeful as ever. I'm optimistic, of course, but the level of just aggressive confidence I would have had last year or 2 years ago, 3 years ago now. No, I probably don't have that same level. CK mentioning that Puglisi coming in for the Hail Mary game against Tennessee. Puglisi probably has a stronger arm from midfield than Gunnar Stockton does. That's probably true. Georgia, and I'm just being honest, also got a quarterback injured on a Hail Mary at the end of a half at a game pretty recently, and I think they're mindful of, especially when they're having trouble blocking it, I think they were mindful of that too, if I had to guess. Not that they don't care about getting Puglisi hurt, but Georgia needed to throw a Hail Mary in that spot. You've got to try to get something out of it, but their offensive line was having a hard time blocking on that particular day, and they had gotten a quarterback injured in a similar situation only, 5 games prior to that? And so I do think the injury risk to Gunnar was also a reason for that decision too. Let's get some more Facebook comments. Ken Holcomb says that Puglisi's got a great arm. He just needs to learn and to be careful with it and not force the ball into coverage due to being overconfident. Yeah, look, here's the thing that's always, I think, true. is that there's a great deal of playing quarterback that's just invisible. And this is one of the things that attracts people to Georgia. Even in some cases, receivers end up putting up less numbers. They want to be a part of what they think of as the pro-style offense. Processing is invisible. We don't see who is and isn't processing. We don't see that. But when a quarterback is deemed, quote unquote, not ready, it's almost always related to the processing, especially at a place like Georgia. Can you see what I need for you to see as fast as you need to see it? And y'all, think about anything you've ever done. It all gets slower over time. So I would say in the case of Ryan Puglisi, who seems like a great guy, and everybody seems to really like him, seems to come from a great family, and like there's a lot to recommend about Ryan Puglisi, a lot to recommend. But I do think it's appropriate to understand the invisible part of playing quarterback, and that is growth that we just don't see. If you show a video clip of Ryan Puglisi, man, he looks just like a quarterback, and that stuff matters. The physical traits obviously are important. But this season is about, does the game slow down, and how do you process it a little bit better? Because, I mean, we're led to believe that some of what's going on with Arch Manning in Texas is processing based. Spencer Clark says it's nothing like high school. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the most truth statements you can make. And, I mean, just go, if you're ever at a local park or something like that, just go stand in the middle of the field every now and then. I always think it's amazing how when you stand on the field looks so much bigger than it does on TV. Big bodies, big arms, big guys. Football players that we watch on TV have a tendency to make the field look smaller. The big quarterback arm just gets from here to there so quick that it just seems like it's your local, like, turkey bowl type, pickup game style field, and it's not. From one sideline to the other is 53 and third yards long. That means if you stand middle of the field and you throw to the sideline, that itself is a long throw. That's a long throw already, and that's what quarterbacks think of as the easy throw. But that in itself, just stand there from the middle of the field and try to throw to the sideline. That's a longer throw than you realize. My point is that, okay, so on that field, you've also got defenses doing all kinds of stuff to disguise what it is they're doing. And as I said before, go back and watch some of the Arch Manning stuff. I mean, some of his issues this year would appear to be just not quite making sense of some of the disguises. And some of the things that a defense does to make it seem like they're doing something else. That is a lot to process. All right, let's do final comments. We got to go. Ralph Price says time is a quarterback's best friend. And I tell you, it seems like quietly, maybe this Georgia offensive line is getting a little bit better. If you care about some of the advanced metrics people and things like that, it sounds like the Georgia pass protection grades are going up. How much of that you put stock in is your business, and it'll obviously be a very different situation against the loud crowd of Auburn on Saturday, but it seems like they're getting a little bit better, giving Stockton more time to make the decisions he needs to make and trust his pocket protection enough to stand there and let it rip. I'll also say this. Monday press conference, we won't play this clip probably because we just don't really have time to, but one of the things that Georgia's getting a lot from right now is Drew Bobo. And one of the things that people behind the scenes told us a year ago was a real problem was communication on the road. That games in which Georgia was struggling on the road, sometimes communication was a big part of that. And just notice this. Yesterday, Kirby was asked, or Monday, whatever day, I guess it meant yesterday, was asked about Drew Bobo. And the context of the question is, so many moving pieces with your offensive line, how important is Drew Bobo proving to be for you? And the first thing that Kirby, if you watch the press conference, many of you do, what's the first thing that Kirby mentioned? Communication. Oh, he's great at communication. Y'all, that's a big part of it. And apparently Drew Bobo is very good at it. Senator Von Braun was really good at it. You go back to 2023, there's been plenty of reports about this, that it was really Van Pran, I always pronounce it like he's German. But Van Pran was identifying a lot of those defenses and doing a lot of the heavy lifting for Georgia in situations like that, really leaning on his football IQ in 2023. And I think that Jared Wilson's a really athletic offensive lineman. He was obviously a very valuable draft prospect. I don't know that he was the communicator that Van Pran was, the identifier that Van Pran was, and I think that Drew Bobo is probably an upgrade on that, even though Jared Wilson was a very good offensive lineman. I think that Bobo might be an upgrade on that. Just trying to read between the lines, that may be true. All right, last comment that we're going to go. Barry Watkins hoping for no false starts on the road. Boy, that'd be nice. That'd be nice for sure. A Low Country Dog, great to meet you too. Low Country Dog came onto our post-game show and had a very funny appearance. I love to see that. UGA Marine talking about Brock Purdy trying to throw over much taller offensive linemen. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think the NFL gets a little too obsessed with its height specs and things like that. But it is true that if you can't see, it's hard to throw. And, I mean, there's nothing like – it's almost like if you play golf, you have to hit a blind shot. That's a little bit hard. But when you make a throw to an area that you really can't see, hoping that the receiver's just going to be there, you got to imagine that's really hard. It's SEM Dog, by the way, pointing out, we'll make this our last comment, that don't discount Georgia's comfortable win, given the fact that our friends from Penn State would have loved to have had one of those on Saturday, and no doubt that's true. All right, so good stuff today. Y'all check out our RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. They show up on time, do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on that. Keeping that AC tuned up and keeping you cool. It's kind of muggy right now because of all the drizzly rain. That means my air conditioning is still working pretty hard, especially at night. I like to be cool when I sleep. So we'll find RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com. Y'all have a great day. Back tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by ServPro. We'll look forward to talking to you then.